pencil so I can actually read it. And I borrowed some glasses from my friend Andrew so I can actually read my notes. So, I mean, since making that mistake, 18 hours ago, I have brushed up my act so much that this video is going to be a lot better. Okay. Well, so far I feel I'm saying too much and not getting to the meat of the issue. The meat of the next issue, the next segment that Rajesh might want to edit down, suspend all judgment for a moment and believe it's impossible not to make a mistake. Now, I've said for a long time, a sort of almost a mantra, there's no such thing as coincidence, there's no such thing as a mistake, there's no such thing as an accident. There might be such a thing as an accident waiting to happen. Probably not, but, for example, an earthquake. Yellowstone Park in California is destined to blow up, big time. But we know that earthquakes happen, I don't know, every 6,000 years or something, the big one. And we know the big one is overdue, but, an accident waiting to happen. It will happen sooner or later, but when is anyone's guess. But I'll come on to that. So, take it on trust. If you can, if you can't, you can't. If you can, you can. Take it on trust that there's no such thing as a mistake, a coincidence, or an accident. Okay. Now, and also, the modern world, certainly in the UK, has gone what I call empiricism mad. And what I mean by empiricism, the government won't act on experiential evidence. They say, well, experiential evidence, we can't put it down, we can't be certain about it, and we don't want to make a mistake, and the electorate will vote us out of power. So, we'd better make sure that everything we do is backed by evidence, concrete evidence. And, I have a bit of a problem with empiricism. This concept that if you can't, one way of putting it, if you can't smash it to pieces with a baseball bat, it doesn't exist, or we should treat it as if it doesn't exist. And taking it one step further, if you can't smash it to pieces with a particle accelerator, it doesn't exist. Now, this is very, very limited, oversimplistic thinking. There is more to life than things you can destroy with a baseball bat. Believe me, I'm going to come on to this. There's materialism and there's spirituality, and we've got the balance wrong. Materialism is winning over spirituality is beginning to fight back, and we need a world with materialism and spirituality. But spirituality, in my view, spirituality needs the upper hand. And Albert Einstein's full of great quotations. There's one about this, something like intuition or imagination is the gift, and rational thinking should be the servant of the gift. Well, actually, in the modern world, it's the other way round. It's the rational mind which is sort of ruling the roost, sort of thing, and imagination and creativity and intuition are. Well, when it tries to leak out, it often leaks out as mental illness. So the people with the most potential for happiness tend to end up in asylums, mental hospitals like me. And in a nutshell, I'll come on to this. Child abuse, unaware child abuse, sows the seeds of mental illness later in life, and some mental illnesses are socially acceptable and some are not. And the politicians want to keep the loonies off the street so they continue getting voting, and the psychiatrists and the pharmaceutical industry say, well, we can keep the loonies off the street if you give us enough money, and hence a psychiatry system that doesn't work. And Robert Whittaker writing a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic. There is an epidemic of mental illness in the world because the response is wrong. If the diagnosis is wrong, the remedy will be wrong. The diagnosis of mental illness is wrong. Psychiatry has not got a clue as to what's really going on. There's a schism between psychology and psychiatry. Jordan Peterson and I are psychologists, and psychiatrists are on a weird planet. They're on a weird planet with a weird agenda. There's a schism between psychology. I went to a meeting once, where I sort of sort of try and protest my innocence, and at that meeting, my psychologist was with me, and the psychiatrist was in charge. And after the meeting, my psychologist said, "Martin, your performance was wonderful." He said, you were calm, cool, collected, assertive, total capacity, very reasonable, absolutely, I'm behind you 100%. And I said to him, "Why didn't you say something to the psychiatrist?" And my psychologist said, "Because they wouldn't understand." Oh my God. I can sort of laugh about it now, but gosh, the last 26 years, I've done a lot of the opposite of laughter, I can tell you. And I have been close to suicide, but when you have God on your side, even if God is a poetic metaphor, Jordan Peterson says he acts as if there is a Christian God. He acts as if Christianity is the master scripture, but whether there is a real God behind the poetic metaphor, don't go there. I mean, the best minds in the world, philosophers, have been arguing, I can prove God exists, I can prove, I've always thought you can't prove God or not God. And Stephen Hawking, before he died, he wrote this book called The Grand Design, and in this book it starts off talking about, model. Model science he calls is based on critical realism, and he talks about human beings. Model dependent reality. Now, read the book, The Grand Design, if you're up to it. I mean, my mother wasn't up to it. I mean, it really is the theory of everything, but there we are. But this model-dependent reality, human beings, inside our minds, we build models of what seems to be out there. There's something out there that our senses perceive. We don't just have the five senses, there's much more than that. But our senses perceive, so-called reality, and our brains build models. Now, if those models, help us to predict what will happen next, it empowers us to look for happiness, find happiness, and hold on to happiness. If to the degree that our models are defective, then we will stumble through life or end up in the shit. I've got a tickle in my throat, but I've got myself a drink. And model dependent reality. Stephen Hawking, in his Grand Design, he said, well, if your model is that there's a God who's omni this, omni that, omni everything, omnipotent, can do bloody anything at any moment, you said you cannot fault that model. You cannot fault it. Well, if you interpret the model with integrity, you cannot fault it. But also, the scientific model, critical realism, that's hard to fault also. So whether you choose one model or the other is a bit arbitrary. If your model hangs together, fine. But the next person may have a different model that also hangs together. So how do you choose between models? Well, in the book The Grand Design, Stephen Hawking gives some guidelines as to why to choose one over the other. But at the end of the day, he had an agnostic position, which was, take your pick. Go for what suits you. I mean, he gives some guidelines for choosing, but take what suits you. But before he died, he nailed his colours to the mast and came down on the side of atheism. Maybe because a life in a wheelchair. Well, the doctors expected him to die in his 20s because he used his brain. They said about using the brain, which heals the body. And gosh, he survived. I don't know how old he was when he died. But having lived that sort of life, writing books, with the help of colleagues, by blowing into a tube connected to a computer, I'm not surprised he concluded that there was no God before he died. Anyway, that might be another segment. I'm going to look at my notes now. That might be another segment to chop into a small segment. So as well as empiricism, it's sort of like, you know, writing a thesis and then saying QED. And mind you, university libraries must be full of theses which have been, we've given a grading of A+ or whatever, that are going to gather dust. I think we should sort of put all university theses on the internet and and make them accessible. There's a wealth of knowledge out there hidden away. But as well as empiricism, there's pragmatism. There's experiential evidence, which could be called suck and see. Prayer. What do you mean, pray to God? I mean, God might not exist. So what's the point in praying to God when there might not be a God? Well, perhaps when you talk to God, God is a metaphor for the subconscious mind. You're actually talking to your subconscious mind, programming your conscious mind. You see, Derren Brown is another, for those, if you don't know him, he's a showman. He's into psychology too, and he does clever tricks, TV program called Tricks of the Mind. And what was I going to say about him? Yeah, I don't know. One of his shows, he did a social experiment on a whole village, and he proved that people who consider themselves unlucky were not looking for lucky breaks. People who consider themselves lucky were looking for lucky breaks. Wonderful stuff. And so if you can change something, if prayer changes your mindset from being pessimistic about lucky breaks to being optimistic. So if you're pessimistic, you walk around with your eyes closed. If you're optimistic, you walk around. Derren Brown, this guy that was pessimist, he knew this bloke was going to walk round the corner. He put a £50 note on the pavement, and this guy who considered himself unlucky didn't notice it. QED. Okay, moving on. I'm only a third of the way down page number 1. Right, new segment. Sera. Wonderful song actually. Look it up on YouTube. I think Doris Day's here. Sera. When I was young, I asked